the things that we ended with the dynamical observation. And I sort of softly erased the parts that mentioned the flow because eventually we're going to forget the flow. But right now, let's prove something that we already knew to be true. But flows, I think this appears in the work of Barthelmé around 95, is the following theorem that says, actually, it's an if and only if your orbit space for a flow is on a compact free manifold is trivial, just the standard R2 with its horizontal vertical foliation. If and only if your flow is the suspension of a linear Anosov map on the surface. In that case, your fundamental group is a subgroup of the conjugacy of affine transformations. So you have the Cornell subgroup that translates in your Anosov map, acting as it normally does. Okay, so the implication I didn't write down is a fun exercise. You think about how the suspension works, universal cover off you go. Let's prove this one, which is the real count. Yeah, I'm going to try and be efficient. So, okay, first I need a lemma. Okay, so it's the following statement. If I have two elements in my fundamental group and they both preserve the same weight, right? So I have some weight preserved by 2. Then F and G have a common fixed point. So L is just the lead with one of my equations. So I know F and G each have a fixed point that comes from property A1. Okay. So I just want to show that it's the same one. And because I know they already have fixed points, up to replacing them with their squares, I can assume that they preserve the orientation of the space. They don't flip it. Squares have the same fixed point as the original element. And so I'll just make this assumption. And let's consider the subgroup that they generate in phi 1 in my group acting on the plane. Since they both preserve L, this subgroup acts on L. And by property A1 of my action, for every element, every word in F and G, it acts on L with exactly one fixed point. Right? I don't know yet that they always all the same fixed point. Okay, but there's a nice theorem, classical theorem of Solidov, that says when I have a group of homeomorphisms of the line, with the property that every element has at most one fixed point, well, then it's one of the obvious examples. It could be an action by translation. Okay, it could or it could have a global fixed point and then act by translation on the two sides. So I use a global fixed point, or it could be the third option, which is a subgroup of the affine. And 2 and 3 are not mutually exclusive, right? In your subgroup of the affine group, there is a nice subgroup of the affine group that has a global fixed point, right? And that's the translation for the subgroup. Okay, so Solidov theorem. In the special case where everyone has exactly one fixed point, implies that there exists a global fixed point. If not, if no global fixed point, Solidov says that you're semi-conjugate to a group of affine transformations with some non-trivial translational. Okay, so this lemma was really sold up here in the top. So in particular, F and G have a common fixed. Okay, now I can prove the theorem using the lemma. Okay, so my trivial plane and the fact that my action preserves these two foliations, right, means that we know some F acts by some homeomorphism of the plane of the form, well, it preserves the two coordinate directions. Wait, that only depends on F. Right, I act on each leaf space separately, and that gives me the action on the whole. We know by axiom 1 that these F1 and F2s, these induced actions on leaf spaces of my two foliations, each have at most one fixed point. Maybe I should have called them F to S and FU instead of F1 and F2. They're the actions on the leaf spaces, right? So you can fix at most one leaf, because if I fixed two leaves, then I have fixed points on each, right? By my axiom, and then, well, then I fix the use of the transverse foliations that went through them. So then this point would also be preserved, and that would break axiom 1. So by this picture, they have at most one fixed point. That's our property 1. I guess I didn't say explicitly there, right? Topologically expanding on one leaf and contracting on the other means you don't have two fixed points on the same leaf. Right? You're topologically expanding, so as I iterate, except for the fixed points, things go off. A2 now says that there's no global fixed leaf for the entire action. The fact that you'd have a dense orbit, otherwise you wouldn't have. Oh, that takes a minute to unpack. With 6 points. That's a picture that I like to draw. And so we can apply Foldov's theorem again. Each of these actions factor-wise, and says that action on each leaf space is now semi-conjugate to affine action. An affine action on the real one. And one without global fixed points, so genuinely a group of affine actions, non-trivial translation. Okay, a little bit of thinking about, so if I knew this action was minimal, then I could improve my semi-conjugacy to a conjugacy. A little bit of thinking, and I know I have a dense orbit, but that's not good enough for normality, right? But this second property of the set of fixed points of elements being dense, and therefore the set of fixed leaves in each leaf space being dense, and thinking about how affine subgroups look, where they kind of blow this up and have something not genuinely conjugate to an affine action, you see these gaps, so that's the point. So A2 again implies that this action is minimal in the semi-conjugacy, with a genuine conjugacy. It's just nice one-dimensional dynamics of affine subgroups in their conjugate. Right? And so I can apply this component-wise conjugacy and get that my whole group acts by affine subgroups. I.e., what this was, right, and set up some arbitrary f of xy for each element. This is always of the form ax plus b, cx plus cy plus c, where a, b, c, d depend on it. You can say a bit more, right? A is non-zero if and only if c is non-zero. And in which case there would be a fixed point somewhere, and so topological expansive compaction says that like A is bigger than 1 if and only if C is less than 1. So that tells us that I look like a group of affine transformations, and now it's a free-manifold topology type of argument to say the flat conclusion, which is you really were coming from a flow. So here I didn't use anything about that I came from a flow. I just used these properties where I had even erased all the flow parts. Right? If you really knew you came from a flow on a free manifold and you tried to do our reconstruction theorem procedure from before, you would find that in order for this like pairs, right, to have this nice identification with the universal cover and this nice equivariance with respect to pi1 action, meaning you could do the quotient, that translates into the fact that the action of pi1 on this big pairs I would call F is properly discontinuous, right? And co-compact if your manifold is compact. And if you think about what that means when you have an affine action on your standard R2 plane, that means that actually you end up having to be a discrete group of affine transformation. The sort of the second coordinate is telling you the derivative. And so what did you end up with? You ended up with your fundamental group of your three manifold sitting inside this affine dissolvable group. So you can solve manifolds. You can build the quotient by the reconstruction procedure I told you before, and you get a suspension of a linear Anosov force. So I will leave that at the hand waving stage. But the upshot is that once you have this whole setup worked out, and you know how this is actually acting, and you know it's properly discontinuous, you can do the reconstruction. You do a nice exercise with ring manifold topology with the field is supposed to be. Okay, so that gives us a theorem that tells us what do all the trivial things look like. Let me tell you what some non-trivial things look like. So here's a non-trivial example. And this is, I want to take a minute to draw you a picture of what the orbit space looks like for geodesic flow on our surface with, say, a hyperbolic. Well, it lives on the unit tangent bundle of a surface of S was some other thing, was called sigma hyperbolic. So this is my framing. So it's universal cover, right? It's topologically it's a universal cover of my surface. hyperbolic plane cross R, but it may be easier to see via this intermediate cover, where I think of the unit tangent bundle of hyperbolic space. That's not the universal cover, but if I now unwind this circle direction of unit tangent vectors, I'll get the universal cover of my manifold. Let me draw you a picture of this one. This I can think of as being hyperbolic plane across the circle, and I could trivialize it so that my stable foundation is like the horizontal slices in the trivialize. This is a nice picture where I have a stable leaf. I'm going to try and draw like a introspective horizontal Poincare disk for hyperbolic space. This is looking like the Poincare disk model of hyperbolic space. And to be a stable leaf means like what unit tangent vectors do I see here? They are the ones with a common forward endpoint. Right? These are the orbits of my flow along this leaf. And I have a whole stack of these, right? For each point it has there's another endpoint. I have my whole circle's worth of these. And if I wanted to understand instead of the circle's worth of leaves, where I identify top and bottom, it's universal cover. Right. Well, then this circle factor I just aligned to a real line factor. So this becomes R, and I'm going to see a whole real line worth of it. So eventually I would have gotten on around at another slice where maybe I ended here instead, kept going, ended up back where I started. So this one. And here I'll just keep going to this giant stuff. This picture all right? So I've drawn the universal cover when I collapse orbits to points, right? In each one of these horizontal leaves, I've got like open intervals worth of orbits, right? Parameterized by all of their backwards endpoints along the circle, which are allowed to be anything except for that point. Okay. So whatever my orbit space is, it's going to be express itself as a collection of lines. But I need to understand the other foliation in order to draw this really as a foliated point. So what's the unstable foliation? Well, let's draw one leaf of this. Right. I'll start with this stable leaf I drew to begin with. It's going to intersect this stable leaf in a single point, right? Not in a single point, in a single orbit, so along a single geodesic. There you go. And what is this leaf? It's going to be things with like it consists of all the geodesic, all unit tangent vectors, right, that are backwards asymptotic to this point on the graph. Geodesic 12. Okay. So if I go down to this stable leaf, I'm going to see that one. If I go up here, I'm going to see it intersect along here. In general, as I move along, right, the stable leaf tells me the forward and the unstable leaf being common will tell me the backward. So what hopefully you can understand from this picture is I get a collection of lines, right, that are moving around and doing kind of the tour at the end of the circle as I go up. So if you were to kind of fill this all in, I don't know, you get some kind of spiraling. Okay, but at some point, some leaf here, right? I get to the forward, so these corresponding to things that are forward asymptotic at this point. And this stable leaf cannot intersect that. There's no geodesic that goes starts and ends at the same ideal point on the boundary. The boundary of my circle is not part of the inside of this universe. Okay, and of course, as I continue to go up, the same phenomenon will happen again, right? I'll come around and there'll be a loop where I just go to the second. What does this tell me? This says that one of my unstable leaves intersects on intervals worth, right, bounded intervals worth of stable leaves. If I was trying to draw this leaf space, I could suggestively draw my stack of stable leaves a little bit offset to make this picture easy to draw. And my unstable leaves will just fail to intersect intersect a whole interval's worth, and then like just fail to intersect one at the top. And this is a nice convenient way to do it, because if I pick another unstable leaf slightly offset, say maybe this one in this direction, that's determined by this, right? The point, in this way I've set it up, that it just fails to intersect will be like a little bit higher up. The interval will be a little bit higher up. So my bifoliated plane is homeomorphic to this open strip. Right? This is topologically R2, right? This is some open strip with its horizontal and vertical foliation. Okay, this picture is so special, we give it a name. This is called a Q plane. And geodesic flows are some, but not the only example of Anosov flows on compactification manifolds that have Q planes as their orbit spaces. In many circumstances that doing surgery on such little flows produces new examples when you still have Q. I want to keep my dynamic. Now I'm going to prove the fundamental structure here. Stating hopefully true. We can find that. That tells you that the trivial example and the skew example are the only pictures I can draw, although there are many more that I'm bad at drawing. All right. So what is this theorem? So the version for flows proved independently by Fenley and Barthelmé around 1994 and 95. I'm going to state it to transition ourselves to emphasize that it's only proved using this list of things. I'm going to state it as follows. So suppose I have some abstract discrete group and it acts on a plane with two transverse foliations, so a bifoliated plane. Preserving the two foliations individually and satisfying this list of properties. A1, A2, A3. Okay, so it looks like something that came from a transitive Anosov. Then your plane with its transverse foliations either trivial, meaning R2 with the horizontal vertical foliation, Q, meaning homeomorphic to that infinite strip with its horizontal and vertical foliation. Notice this one is definitely not trivial, right? In the trivial leaf, every leaf of one foliation leaves every leaf of the other foliation. And here we cooked it up, but that's exactly what was not. Or 3, the space of leaves with each foliation both of them, is non-Hausdorff. Meaning that you see the kind of phenomenon where you have like a sequence of leaves and they limit not onto a leaf, but onto some kind of union of leaves. And this happens not in just one foliation, but in both. This is a trichotomy about what your plane can possibly be. Okay, and the proof I'm going to give is essentially just copying Barbeau's proof. Being careful only to use these three things. That's essentially all. Fenley's proof makes reference to the three manifold a little bit more, but I'm sure you could doctor it up in the same way. Having talked about this subject before, I have an announced this theorem, and I'm like, we're never gonna have time to prove it. And people are really like, how does that work? So we're gonna do it today. It's very nice. And I think a really good illustration of the power of just understanding how the dynamics produce something with the orbit space. This ends up being fundamental in the study of Anosov flows on three manifolds. The work that Barbeau and Fenley and many others have done since then in the past, like 25 years or whatever, has used this fundamental. Okay, so great. Let's give some names to my foliations. And so my plane, I'll call it O, even though it's no longer in orbit space. Maybe I'll call it P. And my foliations, they're no longer stable, unstable. They're just two foliations. So let me call them, I don't know, F plus and F plus. To say there's two. Okay. So let's see. The leaf space of one of these, say F plus, is some kind of one manifold. It's a simply connected one manifold. That's just some general topology. So if it's Hausdorff, it can be homeomorphic to R. So let's assume this one's Hausdorff. Oh, homeomorphic is the real line. So assume this is true. And then what do we need to do to prove this trichotomy theorem? Now I want to show that the leaf space, maybe I'll call it L minus of F minus, is also Hausdorff. And I have fewer trees. You can make other examples where both these spaces are and they're not pure trivial, but not where you have a group acting satisfying kind of thing. So because one of my leaf spaces is R, if I fix a leaf from the other one, the mystery F minus L minus leaf space, its intersection with all the leaves of my F plus, my R leaf space, is going to give me some like connected open subset of R. Right? Well, let me write that down on report. So a leaf L of F plus F minus intersects the leaf space or projects to of L plus R along an interval. Parameterize this by R and consider the like maximum and minimum leaves that a fixed leaf from L minus into. Now I'll go back to my board and write a formal definition. So let's define a function alpha from the leaf space of the mystery foliation to R, that's the leaf space that we know, by alpha of L is just the infimum of L plus in the plus foliation that intersects L. And I could have an omega similarly defined. Sorry, alpha is the here too. So in my picture here, this is just what I was drawing here. This leaf is alpha of the pink leaf. This is alpha, and this leaf is omega. If I consider the original setup, where one of my leaf spaces here is R, going in the vertical. That's what I'm picking at. Okay, but in general, here my second leaf space was R. And in general, I don't know that yet. Okay. So let's make some observations. What can we say about this? Number one. Okay, number one is the set of leaves. So that alpha is equal to minus infinity, meaning that like they intersect leaves of L plus all the way down. This is invariant under my group action. And my group is foliation. And it's not just G invariant, but it's also, I claim it's an open set. So let's see how I can see this. So suppose I have some leaf L. Again, I'll suggest use this leaf of my mystery foliation. I'll assume the one parameterized by R kind of stacks them up vertically. You have a nice one. And here alpha of L is minus infinity, so it kind of goes all the way down. So assume alpha of this L is minus infinity. I want to show that's true in a neighborhood of this. Okay, well by A2, I can find some fixed point of an element that's very close by, close enough to be near some neighborhood where my foliations are locally distributed. It gives me another leaf in mystery foliation, but with a fixed point of an element G. But now I know it has a fixed point, so by A1, its dynamics look like this. And blue leaf, the horizontal leaf is in my grid foliation with leaf space R. So this exists by A2. So I can make it close enough so that it's grid foliation leaf. And maybe that's G1, and I can also do this on the other side. Find someone over here. And I claim that actually everywhere in between here, I will see for every leaf that passes through here at all. I'll make this close enough so that I can get a kind of a product region inside this box. Every leaf that passes through this product region actually has alpha equal to minus infinity. So why is this true? Well, first, if alpha of G1 was not equal to minus infinity itself, I would see some leaves that of my blue, my good R covered foliation that did not intersect it. But my pictures invariant under my group action. If I iterate L, my leaf will approach this fixed point, right? And so G to the some very high power of L, it has a minus infinity, so it has to intersect this and keep going. And oh, I don't need to make a argument after that. Hold on. No, sorry. I don't need to put assert that. Actually, I don't care what alpha of this one is. Like, I don't want to have to do more work than I need to. I just want to apply powers of G1 and find these that are arbitrarily close to here. Arguing into what degree this function is sort of like semi-upper contiguous or not obtained. We're going to not do this. I find some G1 to the n of L, where alpha of this is minus. It intersects every leaf. It's close to G1 for this leaf is right now. Great. All right, let's go to the other side and apply powers of G2. Either G2 or its inverse will contract along the bifoliation. And I'll similarly see like this, which is G2 to some high power of L. And I know its alpha is also minus infinity. So this tells me that every leaf in my nice foliation with leaf space R intersects both this one on the right and this one on the left, and therefore had to intersect everyone in the middle. All right, so then this tells me that this whole open region containing L, it has alpha value that is minus infinity. Okay, great. So I have a G invariant open. That's the action of G on my leaf space here has dense orbits coming from the existence of a dense orbit over there. So I conclude that alpha is either identically minus infinity, or it's always fine. And I could have made the same argument about the omega function too. It's either always infinite or always fine. We've already seen both these cases where the infinite one happens in the trivial case, the finite one happens in so we're somehow a little step of the way on to proving that things look either two or trivial a little bit. Can I erase this with the need to list inside to the picture of the phone? Okay, so the next step, which is easy, is to show that if alpha is always finite, so is omega, and vice versa. One takes the value infinity somewhere, the other one is also always infinity, and you get something that looks like the trivial thing. Well, maybe I should observe that for very simple observation. If alpha is always minus infinity, and omega is always infinity, then what does this mean? This means that every leaf of L minus intersects every leaf of X plus, right? Every leaf of one foliation intersects every other. That's my definition of what this means. So my plane is leaf space from this one cross leaf space of the one I understood. These intersect these unique points, so I can make this identification. And since this was a plane, this had better have been our every leaf intersects every leaf. So my foliation is really just the R cross R foliation is trivial. Otherwise, in general, I can think of my plane as sitting in some subset of like leaf space cross R, but it won't be that. Okay, so now we have to, now we're going to try and do the whole end game. What happens if alpha is always finite? So I can, say in this case, oops, always greater than minus infinity. Alpha is the bottom. Alpha is. So I claim that in this case, omega is also always finite. And it suffices to show that by this, that it's just like finite, pick the value, not infinity somewhere. So it's infinite somewhere, it's like infinite everywhere. So let's try and do that. So let's consider just some point 6, 5 sums yourself. Oh, here's X. On a leaf L. And alpha is supposed to be not minus infinity, so that means there's some leaf that doesn't intersect it. The first one in my stack of leaves where I'm trying to find R. Well, this being the first leaf that doesn't intersect this, it is also fixed by G. The way that this is hooked up with this, if I have a leaf that invariant has a G, then the first leaf that doesn't fail to intersect it, or the set of leaves that don't intersect it, is invariant under G, and therefore the so alpha is the infimum, right? And here I have an alpha that is strictly bigger than minus infinity. Yeah, don't worry. It was a high probability underneath them. All right, but this one I did. Great. So this is also invariant by G. So it has some, by axiom 1 that I right, it has some fixed points for G on it. And through this, I see a leaf of my other stable constant of my minus leaf. Maybe this is now called L prime or something like this. But this leaf does not have the right to intersect the F plus leaf through X. And this is a very fundamental observation. If I have 2 points fixed by a single element, that leads through them are not allowed to intersect, because if they did, I defined 2 fixed points for my element on that same leaf. I'm going to use that argument already. All right. So what does this say? This implies that omega of L prime is finite. It's less than whatever the leaf was in my leaf space. And so I found one leaf whose omega value is finite. I conclude that omega is always finite, because the dichotomy is always infinite or not. Great. Okay, so I'm looking closer to being in the skew case. What's left to show is that under this assumption, both of these functions always bounded away from minus infinity infinity, I get a picture that really looks like that. Right, but I haven't even shown my leaf space housework. I have a little work. Great. I have just enough time to show you the convincing picture, and we'll leave you to wonder this a little bit. All right. So here's the kind of P-plane. Now I'm going to want a whole word for this. God, the picture's big enough. All right, so after there's two things that can happen. I have my leaf L. It has some alpha leaf and some omega leaf, right? There's two things that could happen. One, it could look like the skew case. So this leaf, right, it's infinite. It separates my plane into two unbounded components. Alpha of L and omega of L sit in my plane. They could, like in the skew case, be in different connected components separated by this leaf. That is possible. Or I could be in trouble. The leaf, in theory, could not separate alpha of L and omega of L. Okay, but my claim is that this does not happen. Kind of the key claim for all L, alpha, sorry, and L minus, that's the one we're trying to figure out. Alpha of L is separated from omega of L by L. That's the good skew looking picture. Not okay. Well, to prove it, I'm going to prove it for all leaves that contain some fixed point, like in that picture, and then we'll say that generally actually the same argument. So let's prove a special case where my leaf is fixed by some element G, and there's some fixed points inside of that. All right, so I drew the bad picture, and I want to get a contradiction. So I can start doing what I did before. With this bad picture, alpha is also fixed by G, so it has some point on it. I called Y before, also fixed by G. Omega, same story. Has some point making Z, also fixed by G. Right? And of course, the L minus leaves through here are both fixed by G. And by what I just said, they do not have the right to intersect the leaf through X. So far, this picture is. But I kind of claim that this leaf through X, let me give it a name. I don't know, LX. Plus, because it's in the plus formulation. I claim that this is actually equal to omega of this leaf through Y. And it's also equal to alpha of the leaf through Z. So this really is the first thing that does not intersect this one. The first thing that does not intersect that. Why? Is this true? Then I just said, well, okay. My argument said that, well, either this is true or there's some lower down here that plays the role of omega of Ly. Right? But then that omega of Ly would be fixed by G. There's this point I dance around, and I would define a fixed point for G in between X and the end of this leaf. No good. We have a unique fixed point on this leaf at X. Okay. And the argument is symmetric on the other side. All right, so that is not what happened. This is 5 and 6 points on these for my given element. Okay, so now I know exactly what this picture looks like every time I see a picture. Okay, in very slightly different colors, I'm going to draw the same thing starting with another point. Fixed points of elements are depths, right? So I can choose one that's like here. X prime. It sits on some L plus leaf L plus prime. It has its L minus leaf, which has an alpha. Let's see, I'm separated by this one, so necessarily its alpha is going to be on this side. And it has an omega leaf, and it takes back at least to this side. X prime is fixed by some element, so again, I'm going to have the same kind of situation where on its alpha leaf also fixed, sorry, its omega leaf, the one at the top, also fixed. I will find another fixed point of whoever fixes this. Again, this is fixed by some prime. not the derivative, just some other one. Okay, so there's two cases, right? One is fixed point might be like inside this picture I was just drawing. But the argument I did before says that this leaf is alpha of the leaf through here. So in other words, I have to be able to get on the foliation I was drawing in white and yellow, I have to be able to get from here to here. But this is no good. I will have to cross somehow a leaf of the same foliation. I don't know how. Y prime, U prime, L, G prime. And this is alpha of L, U prime. Just running the same argument again. But there's no lie here. The leaf spaces of the foliations they're just stacked up. There's no way you can scoop around or anything. This space is separated from leaf by the leaf of the wrong kind of foliation. So you cannot limit onto this. You're going to be restricted. Okay, this situation is bad. Let's try case 2. The fixed point happens to be on the other side. All right, well, again, I need to intersect every leaf other than, let's say this in other words. If that's alpha of the leaf through Z, then the leaf through Z has to intersect this one. Right, so somehow I have to connect the dots from here to some point on this leaf. This is the first one or the infimum of ones with 2 intersecting. Right, so this is bad. I am in the same foliation as this white leaf. It's a foliation. It's just like this piece not allowed to cross over there. So I'm stuck. Okay, the end of my picture proof says consider X prime just on the other side of this diagram from X that's fixed by some element G prime. And see that